Today on Rates and Barrels, we share our bold predictions for the upcoming season and discuss some of the most surprising opening day roster decisions around the league. Let's go. Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It is Monday, March 23rd. Derek Van Riper here with Eno Saris with a brand new look and a refreshed sound. We hope you love it. A lot of hard work went into that behind the scenes, thanks to all the wonderful folks that are giving our show a nice facelift here as the 2026 season rapidly approaches. You know, we've got some big weekend news to get to before we get to our bold predictions. Another Phillies extension. Cristopher Sánchez gets a 6-year, $107 million deal. The Phillies say it's a restructuring of their previous deal, which was a pretty team-friendly agreement they had come to a few years ago. Now the team options that were $14 million for 2028 and $15 million for 2029 are guaranteed. They'll also get 2 more years at $30 million each, covering 2030 and 2031, and then club options again somewhere on the end of that. That can also escalate in value based on performance. So ultimately, for a guy who is still a few years away from free agency on a very team-friendly deal, getting this extension seems like kind of a win-win situation, but at least a nice boost for Sánchez coming off a huge season in 2025.
I've got Cristopher Sánchez as my 4th-ranked pitcher in all of baseball, and he hasn't quit, this spring, keeping the fastball velocity above 95 like he had last year. That was a big part of why he surged forward last year, was an increase in velocity. Now, that sort of thing does make me a little bit nervous, given his body type and given his history. The fact that he gets, an extra tick or so, at age 29. Makes me a little bit nervous for his health, but he's a pitcher and the pitchers break, and maybe that's a big part of why he agreed to his side of this deal is, make sure he locks that down. Also, as a 29-year-old who, only has 3 years of service time, he wouldn't have come onto the market at a great time. He was already under an extension that was pretty team friendly, and so this just guarantees that he gets the big payday at the very end. Even if he, we were discussing before the show, like what does Cristopher Sánchez look like if he reduces the velo, if he loses a year and comes back after a surgery or something and doesn't quite have the same velo. And I think that the floor is just really high with a guy that good of a sinker. He reminds me a little bit of like a Logan Webb. Great changeup, great sinker. And always kind of looking for a fastball or cutter that's good enough to keep lefties honest. He's a lefty Logan Webb would play really well. So I think there's a lot of floor here, some injury risk for me. Maybe that's why Cristopher Sánchez made this deal in the end.
Yeah, lefty Logan Webb makes me think of Framber Valdez as another comp as well, a guy you're happy to have in the rotation for a long haul. But the Phillies continue to build it around that pitching with a lot of long-term deals on the books. The other big news coming out of the weekend, Konnor Griffin assigned to minor league camp by the Pirates on Saturday. 16 games this spring. He did pop 4 home runs, hit 171, and struck out 28.3% of the time. We talked about it going into the weekend. With Griffin only having played 21 games at AA last year, it was probably going to take a pretty big spring for him to force the issue for an opening day call-up. But we're still looking at this more in terms of when, not if, we're going to see him with the Pirates at some point in 2026.
Yeah, a 69% zone contact rate is not great. That's, just for context, if you wanted to talk about other players, around the league, I think that this would be, it's a little bit unfair to talk about something like that in such a small sample, but when you are talking about contact rates, when you talk about strikeout rate, this will come up later in the episode. There is a fair amount of signal there too. I mean, when you're talking about contact rate, it's per pitch or per swing. So we're not talking about things that happen on the end of a plate appearance. So those plate appearances, you get 30, 35, 40 in spring. And for him, something like a zone contact rate at 69%. At least that's overall pitches. Last year, the bottom of the zone contact rate of all qualified hitters in baseball was Rafael Devers with a 74. Not saying that Griffin can't be successful with the low zone contact rate. Obviously, Rafael Devers is one of the best hitters in the game, and Griffin does combine that power ability. But it maybe does suggest that he has a little more to do in terms of identifying which pitches to swing at in the zone, how to make more contact in the zone. He's got to get that up a little bit. For all the people that said he looked ready, he did look ready in certain ways, but there's at least this one that he did not look ready.
Yeah, Nick Gonzalez likely the short-term solution at shortstop for the Pirates. And thinking back to how the Pirates handled the promotion of Paul Skeens. Skeens debuted on May 11th during the 2024 season. Maybe that's a reasonable over-under sort of date for when we can expect to see Griffin. I think given that he's a position player and they're not really worried about workload the same way they probably were with Skeens, kind of ramping him up slowly at AAA that year, you could imagine a scenario where Griffin forces the issue a little bit sooner. If he just goes to Indianapolis and tears the cover off the ball for 15 or 20 games even, and they're getting nothing at the big league level from Gonzalez, or they're just getting so little from the lineup as a whole that boost seems like it would be a big deal, that could lead to the promotion. There's also the possibility of an extension. Two sides have been talking about that. We've seen the reports of that on The Athletic as well. So it's always possible things will change quickly because of circumstances like that. I did see in Stephen Nesbitt's column today, Griffin was vying to become the first teenager to start on opening day since Adrian Beltre in 1999. It's been a minute.
Yeah, I remember a young Adrian Beltre. I remember people were pretty excited for that. And I mean, he had an up and down year. Like there were some great moments. And, I just remember him kind of not displaying that vaunted plate discipline just right away, being kind of a free swinging guy. That year when he was 19, he was worth 0.2 of a win above replacement, and only got 214 plate appearances. So he didn't make it all the way through the season that year. But he hit the ground running. You're talking about in 1999 then? Because he's still 19?
That was 1999 when he was.
See, but it's still a bit unfair because he had 214 plate appearances the year before. So
right. The last to debut on opening day was Ken Griffey Jr. in 1989. The last teenager to debut on opening day. So that's even more rare.
Yeah, that's like LeBron James coming up through high school. Everyone watching him. I mean, Ken Griffey was a thing.
Just unreal. Here's the interesting thing for you. I mean, we're at a point in baseball where player development has sped up and we're seeing players younger than we have historically. So I feel like that's a record that even though Konnor Griffin didn't just take it and break it for himself, it's probably going to be broken in the relatively near future. Qualified hitters last year, age 21 and younger, there were 3, which is kind of amazing. And they were all above replacement level players. Can you name the 3 position players who were under 21 last season who actually were qualified position players for the full season?
Oh, God, dude. I should be able to do this, man.
It's a layup.
It's a layup, dude, but I'm an idiot. I'm just a noted idiot, dude.
You want some clues?
I mean, it's got to be someone super young that just came up. Oh, why can't I do this, dude? None
of them debuted last year. They all debuted in 2024.
Why am I so bad at this, dude? Is Pete Crow Armstrong super young?
He's young, but he's not that young.
Dang it. Is Drake Baldwin super young?
No, you're overthinking it.
God, it's like right in front of me. It's somebody that we all know, and everyone's screaming at the damn radio right now, dude.
2 played in the World Baseball Classic. 1 has a hamate injury.
Oh, Jackson Chourio?
Jackson Chourio.
Okay. And hamate injury, that was Lindor and... Oh, there's the 3 of them. Oh, my God. Oh, Jackson Holiday?
Jackson Holiday.
All right.
And then number 1 by WAR last year from this group hit 45 homers.
Oh, Junior Caminero.
Oh,
my God. I just need a little bit of coaching and extra hints and a little babying. God, I'm so bad at this.
The entire audience had all 3 of those names within
way before
10 seconds of the question being put out there.
It's like my brain, my brain just stops working.
You just freeze up. You get the yips on trivia.
Oh, my God. It's so bad.
I wasn't even planning on doing trivia today. I just was clicking around while we were talking. I was like, oh, this is actually kind of interesting. All these young players are really good, and none of them are teenagers on opening day. But again, I think we're going to get there at some point in the near future. We're going to take a quick break, let Eno catch his breath after that surprising round of trivia. When we come back, we'll share our bold predictions for 2026. All right, it's bold predictions time, and the goal is not to be right, the goal is to be spicy. Well, actually, the goal is to be spicy and right, but if you get hot enough on the bold predictions, it actually masks over how wrong they end up being in the end. Now, you published a longer list of bold predictions last week.
Yeah, so you're making me go into it's a 13 here. You're
going to the deep cuts. You're up to 13. We're each going to share 3 on today's show. What do you think your success rate has been historically on bold predictions?
I've been aiming for 300, and I've gotten 300, and it's taken a little bit of cajoling of the bold predictions, where some of my bold predictions are more bold than others, and some I'm like, this is one I'm going to put in the hopper, I'm going to get this one. But last year, I went 1 for 10, so I don't know if I'm pushing myself, and if that's good or if that's bad. Some of them, I might give myself some directional credit from last year, but the only one I was right on completely was that the Phillies had the best pitching staff in baseball. So, I mean, hey, they weren't projected as such, and I was correct. So there was at least one there, but I'm usually around 3. This year, I'm a little bit worried because I did things like Jacob Mizorowski wins the Cy Young, and Roman Anthony wins the MVP. And traditionally, if you look at who wins these awards, yes, Chris Bryant won one in the second season, and Mike Trout in his third, I believe. But this is these awards are usually given to people who are kind of mid-career. It took Tarek Skubal a while to become a guy who could win 2 in a row. It's not like he came up, showed everybody what he had, and the second year he won a Cy. But hey, I'm bold predicting those 2 things and much more, and so take a gander if you like.
So after I bamboozled you with some trivia earlier, I'll let you have the option of going first with your bold predictions here or deferring to me.
I'll go first. We can decide if it's bold or not. I mean, that's part of the whole rigmarole with these things. I was going to say something positive about Wyatt Langford, and so I said he's going to be an all-star starter because I don't know about MVP, but I didn't want to get all the way to MVP. All-star starter. Well, he's projected to be the 4th best outfielder in the American League. That's not good enough. So I landed on Wyatt Langford goes 30-30. And I don't even know if that's bold enough because last year he went 22-22. He's projected for 26 with 20 stolen bases. I think it's a little bold on the stolen base side. He has 0 stolen bases this spring, so there's no reason to think that he's going to go nuts this year in terms of stolen bases. But mostly what I like about him, there's 2 things that I think are a little bit of signal in the mix here. Is that he hit a ball 115.8 miles an hour. That's almost 3 ticks harder than he's ever hit the ball this spring. And we know that one batted ball event that has the maximum exit velocity like that we know that can be meaningful. And so I'm willing to bet that he's swinging harder. It's, what it ports over to is actually raw bat speed. Max EV and raw bat speed are really tightly connected. So what I'm thinking is he's swinging the bat harder. Well, what's great about this is he's swinging the bat harder and he's striking out 11% of the time this spring. And so, if you want to look at the best K percentage improvers this spring, and this is qualified in the spring and qualified last year, Patrick Bailey is striking out 8% of the time this spring. That would be super interesting if reported over. Matt McClain, who everybody loves, is striking out 11% of the time, and he was a 29% strikeout rate last year. So that, again, would be super interesting. I don't necessarily want to say that I love everybody on this list, but Adolis Garcia looks good. Nolan Gorman halved his strikeout rate from last year. If he could keep his strikeout rate around 23, 24, 25% even, that would be a big leap forward for him. Freddie Freeman striking out 5% of the time this spring. I don't know how much signal that is as much as he's just overmatching his competition. And then there's Langford that used to have a 26% strikeout rate last year, has a 12% this spring. So I just love that he's doing that and he's hit a ball harder than ever. So, how much signal is there in this? Well, traditionally, you want about double this amount of plate appearances to really believe a new strikeout rate from a player. But that does mean that there is some signal in this. You know what I mean? It's not, he's got 42 plate appearances. You'd rather have 80 plate appearances, but it's not like saying, his slugging percentage is whatever this spring. You need, for slugging percentage, you need like 5 months, So I'd say that there's some signal here. It's nice to see the added contact. It's nice to see the real hard contact. And so I'm believing more on the 30 side, and the bold part is 30 stolen bases, I guess.
Yeah, and a lot of that's just staying completely healthy for a full season, maybe consolidating some of the skills we've seen over parts of 2 years now in the big leagues. I mean, he only struck out 20.6% of the time in 2024. All the projections are pulling him down into the 22-23 range. The spring numbers, I think, are really encouraging. I'm going to give you a 3 out of 5 peppers, I think, for spiciness on this one. Really good, solid.
I should have pushed it. All right, Wyatt Langford wins the MVP.
Wyatt Langford, 50-50. No.
Wyatt Langford wins the MVP. What's that? That's 5 at least.
That's 5.
All right, there we go. Wyatt Langford wins the MVP.
5.
You heard it here.
I think that'd be a 5 for sure. I did make an AL MVP call, and I think it's sort of something I've been trying to hope for throughout the entire winter as I draft more and more shares of Yordan Alvarez on my fantasy teams. But Yordan Alvarez wins the AL MVP, and people are going to say, why is that bold? He's good. Or some people are going to say, he's never healthy. So, of course, that's bold. I think it's bold because by simple odds, he's the 13th most likely to win the award, right? Just looking at BetMGM. But since 2021, only Aaron Judge and Shohei Ohtani have a higher WRC plus than Alvarez. He's tied with Juan Soto for 3rd in that category. He is a phenomenal hitter. Why hasn't it happened yet? Well, because in the last 3 seasons, Byron Buxton has played in more games than Yordan Alvarez has. So is Corey Seager. So is Christian Yelich. So is Kyle Tucker. And those guys have missed a lot of time with injuries, right? So we definitely have the dwindling health grade concern when it comes to Yordan Alvarez. But if he gets 150 games in a season, he has a path to 45-plus homers. And with the potential to do it as a 300 hitter and a 400 OBP guy, I think that puts him on the very, very short list of hitters in the American League that can go toe-to-toe with Aaron Judge. That's the bar right now. In the AL, if you want to be the MVP, you have to be as good or better than Judge. And as we saw with an amazing season from Cal Raleigh last year, it's going to take an extraordinary effort to do that, and maybe just a little bit of normal regression gravity pulling Aaron Judge down slightly just to make it possible. So I'm on the Alvarez train, man. I think a lot of this is just going to come back to health, and if we can see that full season, we're all going to remember how good he really is.
Yeah, I think that this is a great one. I'm only give you 4 peppers on this one because it's a little bit more likely than Wyatt Langford. So.
Yes. I think by elevating your Wyatt Langford prediction to MVP, you lowered the ceiling of this call for sure. I'm happy with the 4 peppers in this case.
But the one thing that I'd like you, and I'm going to read you a list of numbers, and I'm going to tell you what they are in a second. 498.
It's the whole show in a nutshell. If you ever want to know how the show works, reads a list of numbers and then just tells you about them.
Here are the numbers: 498, 447, 114. Those are the plate appearances in 3 straight years between the ages of 26 and 28 for Aaron Judge. And we said to ourselves, oh, I remember saying stuff like this. Oh, Rick Smits. Oh, tall dudes. Like, oh, he can't. He's too big for himself. He's just always going to be hurt. Well, after he did that, he has 633, 696, 458, but he's still really productive in 2023. 704, and then last year 679. So I don't know. Has he shed the always injured tag? And will Yordan Alvarez, who actually played more than Aaron Judge did in that 3-year stint in his mid-20s, will Yordan Alvarez find some way to kind of stay healthy this year? I think it's not impossible at all, and I think that we hand out the injury-riddled tag way too early.
Yeah, and I think the other factor, of course, changes on the Astros medical staff can't be a bad thing, given that it's not just Yordan Alvarez who's dealt with some major injuries and had some issues with return to play, as Chandler Rome outlined on the show over the course of the offseason. All right, bold prediction number 2. You're ahead by 1 pepper so far. I'm a little concerned that I'm already trailing after our first predictions, but you did change one on the fly, so I guess that happens.
Yeah, my next one will not get 5 peppers, and I think you'll out-pepper me on this next one.
All right, what's number 2?
Number 2 is incredibly niche, incredibly silly, and we might not even be able to test if I was correct. So, so it's the best kind of bold prediction where I can claim victory, even if we're not sure it's true. So the bold prediction is that the number of pitchers with multiple changeups will double this year. And that is because right now there are only 4 starters. If you want to use relievers too, there's only 5 pitchers that used both a splitter and a changeup 5% of the time. Those names are Brandon Young, Simeon Woods Richardson, Austin Gomber, and Yennier Cano. There's one name I didn't mention, and the reason I didn't mention him is because I want to make the point that this is a copycat league to some extent, and the other name is Paul Skeens. And so I think that people are going to look at Paul Skeens and say, hey, he has feel for 2 changeups. Then they can look at the breaking ball guys and they can say, well, Max Scherzer has like 5 breaking balls. Why can't I, who don't have a great breaking ball, why can't I have 2 or 3 changeups? I think that Kevin Gossman has done this at times where he has a splitter and a straight change. And we now have the kick change. So I feel like if we could, this is why it's hard to split this out, is because if we have the kick change and it's not labeled as such, then we're going to have to kind of go through the data somehow and say, okay, this guy has a kick change and a regular change, right? And that might be a little bit hard to do. So we have to find some test to figure out how to tease out the kick changes. But with the kick change, the splinker, the splitter, the Vulcan, all these things that we've amassed over time, this is institutional knowledge, and we're pairing that now with the ability to really dial in seam effects and using technology to build pitches. I think that we're going to have the age of the multiple changeup, and it's going to start soon. So, and the number is so low right now, 4 starters. I just have to get to 8 to be right. So that's like a 2 pepper at most, I think.
I was feeling 2. I like the creativity. I like the spirit of the prediction. And sometimes a 2 grade pepper would be good enough for what you're looking for. So I think that it's a good call. It's a nightmare for Mike Petriello, isn't it?
It really is. I don't really want to put this on his doorstep, but I would also like to know what all the kick changes are. I'd love to just click the little button and look at all the kick changes by themselves. I did try to do it just by, when we were studying it, since at the very beginning there was only 5 or 6 guys that threw the kick change. I could look at it and it looks like they are power changeups that don't really have a lot of sideways fade. They're kind of like downer changeups. That kind of usually go faster. So in a way, they are a little bit like a knuckle curve. And in fact, the grip looks a little bit like a knuckle curve. If you want to take a look at Hayden Birdsong's changeup, we'll throw that up on the screen for you right here. This is a kick change. You're just holding your ring finger off of the ball in a way that kind of looks like a knuckle curve. And it does something to the spin axis, and it allows the ball to sort of kick out. And I think by taking the index finger and the middle finger off of the ball, you're taking the power fingers off the ball for guys who throw breaking balls a lot. So the kick change has been really good for guys who've been mostly breaking ball guys.
Does this also kind of catch a little bit of the wave of the year of the splitter?
Yeah. I'm catching a couple waves here, hoping to make myself right. And this is again back to how the sausage is made. I will always throw in a couple of these. Like if you look at my bold predictions this year, I have one that baseball will once again create a modern day record for stolen bases. That's off of work that we did here on the pod, showing how many different first base coaches are new to the position this year. And I continued that investigation and found that there are 16 new first base coaches this year, and 14 of them have never coached first base before in the majors. So what that says to me is that teams are looking to be aggressive with their first base coaching. They're taking a lot of young guys who've been working with these rules in the minors with young players, and the players themselves are getting younger and faster. And so I think that we're going to push. There was a little bit of a regression last year with the national stolen base totals, and I think we're going to have a lot of teams like we already seen the Nationals stealing a ton of bases, people trying to copy the Brewers who steal a ton of bases, the Rays steal a ton of bases. So a lot of these, forward-thinking teams are really pushing the base pass, and so that's what I do. I mix in things like that seem very likely to happen maybe, but are also on such a large scale that it makes it bold to still say it, because it's a league-wide trend you're trying to capture. And you're also trying to, sort of educate people to league-wide trends and maybe keep your average above 100, which I hopefully can do this year.
I'm worried I'm not going to hit on any of my 3 on the show, to be completely honest. I feel like this is an 0 for 3 attempt for me this season, but we'll see how it fares. My bold prediction number 2 is the Marlins will have a top 5 rotation. Why is this bold? According to F4 projections, the Marlins entered the season with the 18th best rotation. I think the reason why it's going to happen is we saw signs of Sandy Alcantara putting it back together late last season, post-TJ. Yuri Perez has just an unbelievable ceiling. I'm not buying the struggles on the road as anything that we're generally worried about for this year. If you told me he's their best starter this year, I wouldn't be surprised. He's being drafted as their best starter this year by a pretty healthy margin, too. So I think there's a chance that Yuri's the guy that actually gets more Cy votes than Sandy at this point in their respective careers. I've talked about Max Meyer as a guy that was taking off last year before that hip injury really blunted what should have been a great breakout. He looks really good as their number 3. And then it's amazing that the guy that coined Never Paddock would be even remotely close to involved in a prediction that involves him doing something good. But Chris Paddock and Jansen Junk are rounding out the rotation right now. This is really a bet against Paddock in particular, even though it's optimism for the team. I expect to see a lot of Robbie Snelling and eventually some Thomas White in that rotation because I don't think Snelling has anything left to prove at AAA. So it's only going to be an injury or a few ineffective starts from the likes of Paddock or Jansen Junk before one or both of those prospects get in. I think this is going to be a strength of this Marlins team. Wouldn't surprise me if their bullpen was like a top 10 bullpen, somewhat like unexpectedly as well. They project to be 22nd. I think a lot of this is just some belief in what they're doing, calling pitches from the dugout, bringing in some really good coaches. Just the organizational philosophy has changed. They're going to push the envelope a lot. Pitching was a strength before they were doing that, and now I think they're going to lean more heavily into it. I don't know if this leads them to anything interesting as far as being a surprise wildcard team. That is not a prediction that I was willing to make, but I think this is going to be a very, very good group of Marlins pitchers, especially in that rotation this year.
Yeah, I like it. We talked on the player development pod last week with Lance Rodzowski about how, there's a bunch of relievers on the Marlins, late 20s, early 30s relievers that are popping that are, top 10, top 15 in stuff plus across all of spring training. And, that has to come from coaching. I love Bill Hazel as a coach there, and I think that there's a lot to be said for, a progressive organization that's willing to, as we said on that pod, break things and just, push forward and do something different just to kind of shake the ennui off an organization. I mean, this has been an organization that's been stuck, in neutral for a while. So, they're gonna drive forward and they're gonna break some stuff and make some players unhappy perhaps. But also these players, if they help them into major league careers, players like Robbie Snelling and Thomas White, and they had their fingerprints on Ryan Weathers a little bit, those players will love them, too. So that's not all bad. So it's nice to see that these coaches are having an effect on how the game is played for the Marlins. And, just having a good bullpen can actually help your prediction become true. They don't let all the inherited runners score, as Trevor May likes to call it, the good teammates. They can be the good teammates back there.
good teammates would definitely help. But I think it's bold just based on the projection, and also bold just based on the fact they traded away Edward Cabrera and Ryan Weathers this offseason, right? They got immediately worse with those trades, even though they have reinforcements, very capable reinforcements on the horizon. What's the pepper rating on that call?
Oh, that's got to be a 4. I mean, that's why I think you're ahead on peppers now.
All right, 8-7 favoring me going into the third round of predictions. Eno frantically trying to upgrade his last prediction to make it more spicy.
Well, I think mine is pretty spicy by projections. So I'm going to take a team that is tied right now in Fangraphs projections to be the second best team in baseball. So it's a multi-way tie. So you can say they're a top 5 team in baseball. And I'm going to say they're going to miss the playoffs. So I'm going to say the Braves miss the playoffs. I know that there's a lot of excitement right now about Didier Fuentes, a young pitcher that made the roster, and I am excited for him. I think that he is going to be a good player. J.R. Ritchie looked really good in camp. They have some young good pitching. But Reynaldo Lopez is throwing in the 80s right now and does not look that good. And relying on guys like Didier Fuentes and J.R. Ritchie with very little to almost no major league track record, I think it could get a little skinny. Is what I'm saying. I'm saying it's a little skinny in the rotation right now because on top of it, what if Schwellenbach has a complication? It takes another month, or it takes another surgery, or whatever it is. And what if the Lopez thing is something long term? And then Chris Sale, usually has to take a 2-week to a month long break at some point. His back is not going to get better. So I just think that's a little bit shaky in the rotation. And a lot of this is based on projections in the lineup. And yes, you look at the names in the lineup and you're like, this is once was the best lineup in baseball. And they're a lot of the same players because they were all locked into long-term contracts. So projections see all that goodness and say, oh, it's all coming back. But let's count the number of bounce backs that this Braves team is relying on. Are we talking about Ronald Acuna Jr., Austin Riley, Matt Olson, Ozzie Albies? If you want to count Sean Murphy, they need bounce backs. They're from 6 different players on this roster. And I get it. They'll probably bounce back. I love a lot of these players. I've been picking a lot of these players. I think they're a very good team. But when you are relying on that many bounce backs and your rotation looks a little bit skimpy, I don't know. A person that I respect greatly said, yes, they're projected to be one of the best teams in baseball, but they have one of the highest collapse potentials in baseball, and that's what I see when I don't think this is a team that has a lot of depth. As much as I like Fuentes and J.R. Ritchie, there's not a lot of depth in the bullpen. There's not a lot of depth in the lineup. If those guys go down, there's already guys have gone down already.
Yeah, there's a lot. I don't think everybody has to bounce back to 2024 levels and 2023 levels for it to be a great offense again. I think just having a full healthy season from Acuna goes a long way. If they get second half Michael Harris instead of first half Michael Harris, that's probably an upgrade, and that doesn't seem like a stretch. Riley's decline also seems more health related than skills related to me. So much of it is an unknown of lost ability versus time missed due to ailments that mostly appear to be behind that position player core. And a guy like Matt Olson might be the one that has just sort of been aging and playing this whole time, where you say maybe he's the least likely to bounce back because he wasn't impacted by any sort of known injuries the way everybody else was.
Just 31 now.
Yeah, he's just 31 now, so he's just kind of in the beginning of that decline phase. And I know you've had questions about the effectiveness of Strider with less velocity, all the injuries that are piling up on that pitching staff already. It does feel like something has turned against them early in terms of good health outcomes this year. So I get where you're coming from on this call. I think it's another solid 4 for me. I think the only reason it's not a 5, if people are like, that deserves a 5, it's because they won 76 games last year. We kind of saw one of the downside outcomes a year ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
If 2025 hadn't happened, then you'd be getting a full 5 peppers for that call.
Right. Yeah. And I can argue against it too. We love Drake Baldwin here, more than almost any other player in baseball. I feel like we are Drake Baldwin stans. Austin Riley's only 28. Acuna's only 28. And Michael Harris is, what is he? He's
25, 26, so he's not very old.
And Ozzie Albies seems like an old man at this point of the group, is 29, and Olson's 31. So they should bounce back, as a group. And even if I'm pessimistic about Strider, I actually do like Richie and Fuentes. So maybe it is sad when they go to camp with like somebody like a Bryce Elder, where I'm like, you're just doing this because he doesn't have options, man. Just give the kid a shot, dude. Maybe that's what they're doing with Fuentes on the roster. Maybe it's a secret Fuentes Elder piggyback.
As people have pointed out, that's how Spencer Strider started his big league career, working multiple innings in relief, and he was pretty quickly in the rotation that year. So it really wouldn't be a surprise at all to see Fuentes do that. Maybe that's a way to keep the innings cap down while getting all of those innings in the big leagues, and maybe helping to mask some of the depth concerns you were talking about in that relief corps. So I like that decision. And I imagine we'll see J.R. Ritchie the first time a regular starter goes down with an IL stint and they need someone who's more stretched out. I think that gives them a couple of options to bridge the gap whenever they need to. But it's solid 4-pepper bold prediction, which I think across the board that gives you 10, 4, 4, and 2, I think was the final count there. All right, let's see if I can come up with the win here. My final bold prediction. The A's will lead baseball in runs scored. Last season, they were 12th. They were 116 runs behind the Yankees in the number 1 spot. So imagining that they're pushing their way up to the Yankees and Dodgers level, that seems pretty bold to me. They are tied, as you pointed out, for 4th in runs scored per game by Fangraphs. So initially, I was asking you before the show, I was like, top 3 for the A's, pretty bold, and you're like, yeah, I think so. And then you looked it up, and you're like, nope. Not when they're projected to be tied for 4th. So I had to go all the way to the top, which I think will help carry the weight of this projection, or this prediction, rather. Why I think it will happen. I keep thinking about this stat you threw out on the show during the winter from Ken Arneson of Weather Applied Metrics. The previous record for wind-aided home runs before last season was 19 at Citi Field in 2023. Sutter Health Park in Sacramento had 56 such homers in 2025. And as we've learned, last summer was cooler than usual, especially in July in Sacramento. And as you've already talked about in the show, it's unseasonably hot right now in Northern California. You're a couple hours away from Sacramento, but it last year was an outlier weather-wise, and that was still the result we got. And this team is more than the weather. They're a really good lineup that's going to do damage in that park and outside of that park. It's growth from a group of very good hitters. Just imagine having Nick Kurtz for a full season. That helps. Brent Rooker's kind of later stages breakout has been phenomenal. Tyler Stroderstrom looks like a legitimate impact guy still. Shea Langoliers took a step forward, also missed a little time on the IL. We know Lawrence Butler was playing with knee trouble last year. If his knees feel better, I think he can bounce back and be more like the guy he was in the second half of 2024. A healthy Jacob Wilson would be huge for them. Jeff McNeil is at least a significant depth addition for that lineup, and there's still possibly a few more prospects that could work their way into the mix. And as far as their production away from Sacramento last year, they were tied for 7th in WRC Plus on the road at 103. So they are a good, very good lineup, and a deep lineup too, that I think can take one more step forward and really make that unique situation they put themselves in as an organization work for them with the way that roster is built this year.
Yeah, and the A's also got, bottom marks for pitching and pitching development and pitching acquisition. So there won't be a lot of blowouts where they're taking these guys out for defensive purposes. They may need to score to keep putting ones up on the board when the other team's putting ones up. So, I think that there would be some really high scoring games there. They're a great offense. There's really only one hole in the lineup in Denzel Clark. He's such a great defender, and there's some growth potential in him. He's a young guy. If he can make any more contact than he's made, he could be someone who's like a near league average guy and the worst hitter in the lineup. So there's also the potential that Wilson adds a little power going forward, and Max Muncy himself, also maybe a flawed player, but also a player that hits the ball hard at times, and could just show some growth at the right time. So I love this one, but I because they're already fourth, and because by doing this I put us into a tie, I give it 3 peppers.
I knew that was coming. Inevitable. Had a 1 pepper lead, squandered it.
You can't put this thing in the other person's hands. It doesn't make any sense. This is why we need to do this on a 3-person day.
3-person day with a judge, or maybe we'll throw this one in the Discord. We'll let the listeners and viewers decide.
Yeah, give us peppers.
Get us some pepper scores on these bold predictions. You can share your own bold predictions in there as well. We'll get a thread going with that. Should be a lot of fun. The whole point of the exercise is to just think a little bit outside of the norms of the projections, the upper bounds of what's possible, or the lower bounds of what's possible as it pertains to your Braves missed the playoffs projection. Fun to go either direction with those, and one of my favorite segments that we do each and every year.
I mean, you have to think about it. Just last year, what were some of the biggest surprises? The Rays going 77-85. I don't think that was something that we had circled going into the season. The Mariners winning 90 games and, going as far as they did, might have been a surprise. But then even on the player level, we bold predicted so much for Maikel Garcia, years before, and then finally he has his big breakout and was the 14th best position player by Fangraphs WAR last year. So there are always breakouts. There are always young players that that jump to the top, and so I'm going to claim some directional correctness on some of these. If my young players, like if the Miz gets some side votes but doesn't win it, or if if Langford goes 30-28 or something, I might just have to claim those as wins, because it's hard to do this. It's hard to get it right, and it's just fun to think about things that are not likely to happen, because we spend a lot of time on this show thinking about things that are likely to happen. We're trying to look at projections that give us something that's 55% likely or 60% likely. We're trying to live in the 60, we are humble enough to know that we're not going to be in the 90 to nobody is, but we're trying to stay, closer to 2/3 right than we are with bold predictions. We'll be happy to get 1 or 2 of these right for sure.
Yeah, I mean, live in the space that allows your brain to conceive of Geraldo Perdomo becoming a 7 WAR player, because that's fun.
Oh, you were so close. You just see, if we'd had bold predictions that year when you liked Perdomo, you might have bold predicted him into something. I mean, I think he was your kind of bold guy that year.
He was more of like a draft and hold shortstop that I thought would keep his job and get a little better. I wasn't calling anything like 7 WAR from him, but thank you. I appreciate you trying to round up.
Yeah, I mean, I loved Maikel Garcia, so I'll take the second year victory lap on that one. I think that was the true for you too. I think you liked Perdomo not the year that he broke out, like the year before.
Yep. Yeah, and I wasn't drafting him anywhere last year, so I completely missed out after the previous call.
Yeah, I didn't have that many shares of Maikel last year either. It's so annoying when that happens. You're like, oh, guess I was wrong. No, I was right just a year later.
Guess I was wrong. Might not have an everyday job. Guess I'll move on now. One more quick break, and we're going to take a look at some of the most surprising opening day roster decisions, as opening day is now just 2 days away in San Francisco. All right, let's get back to it. Take a look here at some of these other cuts. We started talking about this on Friday. I wanted to run through some that have happened over the weekend and a few that even happened a little earlier in camp. How surprised were you when you saw the news that the Nationals were sending Dylan Cruz back to AAA to start this season? Of course, it's a new front office, so anything was possible, but I did not have that penciled in as a thing that would happen pre-opening day. Like, it was maybe in the range of outcomes with a 6-week slump or something to begin the season. But what do you make of this decision?
Yeah, I don't know. I tried to read the comments about it and tried to read between the lines, and I can't figure it out. They must have something they wanted to work on, something, that's usually what they say when they send somebody down that's young. The Reds, for example, when they sent Rhys Hines down, they said you could make this team as a bench player, or you could go down there and these are the 2 or 3 things that you could work on and you play every day, and so we think that's better for you. So that must be something along those lines with Dylan Cruz, where they're saying, I mean, you're striking out nearly a third of the time right now. You're not showing the power or the contact. Like, you got to find out who you are right now, And, we think that you can do that better at AAA. Maybe they're having trouble getting through to him. Maybe there's an impasse when it comes to coaching. I am just trying to lay out the different reasons this could be, because from the outside, a lot of us had a lot of hope for Dylan Cruz to sort of put together some of the disparate parts of his game and at least be, one of their best defenders and base runners and somebody who had some power upside. I was very surprised by this. Fittingly, I almost just took a sip of water, and then it could have been a split take. But I did know about this one already. Obviously, I think that Cruz will be back up again soon, but I don't know what the benchmark is that they're looking for from him.
Yeah, curious to learn a bit more about that. I mean, if you look at the overall body of work, parts of 2 seasons in the big league since he debuted in 2024, it's 454 plate appearances, 13 homers, 29 steals. Good from a fantasy perspective, but the reality, a 211, 282, 352 slash line, it's a 78 WRC plus. So I don't know if there's a lesson to be learned here in terms of projections and expectations. It's probably, for me, realizing if you're that far below league average, something like this could definitely be on the table sooner than expected. But you would think they want to get a good long look at him against big league pitching for most of this season. So I imagine if all it takes is probably a good April and Dylan Cruz is back up pretty quickly. They sent Harry Ford down too, which was, I don't know, like obviously less surprising than sending Dylan Cruz down, but frustrating because I want to see what Harry Ford can do. He was so blocked in Seattle. We knew that really wasn't going to happen before this trade. So I'm kind of hoping for a similar timetable where it's maybe just a few weeks before he's getting some kind of look from the Nats.
Yeah, I would think the benchmarks for Harry Ford may have more to do with defense than offense. I mean, that was the bigger question mark. That was part of why we rationalized him being able to leave Seattle and being traded for a reliever, was that people weren't sure he was going to be a catcher.
Here's one for you. Jasson Domínguez got sent down to AAA, and I think we have to give Brendan Cuddy some credit. During our Yankees preview, he expressed to us that it was not looking great for Domínguez. There was just not a spot for him on this roster, and it sort of blew my mind, and I think the minds of some of our listeners, because the roster is so similar to last year, and Jasson Domínguez had a role last year. And unlike Dylan Cruz, when you look at the overall body of work, it's a similar amount of playing time over parts of 3 seasons now. 529 plate appearances, 16 homers, 29 steals. Good from a fantasy perspective. 248, 327, 397. Better slash line. It's actually above league average by WRC plus at a 105. Defensively, leaving a lot to be desired in the outfield, though. So that seems to be maybe the biggest sticking point for Jasson Domínguez right now. But this one made probably even less sense to me than the Cruz demotion, again, because they found enough playing time for him last year, in part because Stanton spent a lot of time on the IL, to give him 429 plate appearances despite the same personnel.
And I think he might still get to that number through similar circumstances this year. The problem, I think, is fit, and it has to do with his splits offensively as much as his defense. They have a left-hander in Cody Bellinger. They have a left-hander in Trent Grisham, and they have Aaron Judge. So where do you put a guy who has been 45% worse than league average against lefties in his career so far? I'm not necessarily suggesting that that's his true talent, but if you look under the hood, Jasson Domínguez does strike out 6% more often against lefties than he does against righties. He's never shown the power against them, and even this spring, he's changed the way he bats from the right side. He's been trying different mechanical things to address this. So even if you say mathematically they're like, you shouldn't believe these splits, they're too extreme, then they should just get better in the future. You could say that there might actually be something that you can see observationally. There's something wrong with the way that he approaches left-handers, and that might be the thing they need him to work on if he's going to be a switch hitter that plays every day in the big leagues eventually. So right now, if you're saying he's best used against righties, well, I can't use him instead of Cody Bellinger, and I can't use him instead of Trent Grisham because of the defense. So it's like the two things together, right? The lack of the defense and the lack of ability to hit lefties. So he's an unnatural fit on the roster as it stands pat. And I think this is maybe then less, surprising than Dylan Cruz, because the Nationals are a team that just wants to find stars. And so you're like, hey, just give Dylan Cruz a full year and let him play and see if you found yourself a star. They're not doing this. What the Yankees are doing here is saying, we want to give Aaron Boone the best options every night to win that game. We're not as concerned about Jasson Domínguez's future as we are about winning tonight's game. And Randall Grichuk is a better fit for this right now because he's a right-hander that can go in there on days. Cody Bellinger can play center, and Drake Grisham will sit against left-handers. That's my prediction here, at least, and that is not a role that Jasson Domínguez is well suited for.
Who do you think makes a bigger impact over the next 3 years in the big leagues between Cruz and Domínguez? There's kind of a would you rather dynasty fantasy question here, but even a real life question. I mean, if Brian Cashman called Paul Taboni and said, hey, I got an idea for a trade and it's kind of spicy, do you think they hear each other out and possibly work out a swap of these two players?
Oh, it's really, my first instinct was to say Jasson Domínguez because he's got a demonstrated 120 WRC play. He's been 20% better than league average as a left-hander. So I'm like, at the very least, I've got a left hand. So I think the floor might actually be higher for Jasson Domínguez. He's at very least a floor, like a lefty, like corner outfielder, right? I think that's it. But the ceiling's got to be higher for Cruz because he runs so well and he plays great defense. That if he can figure it out, it's a trade that would never happen because the Nationals care more about ceiling than they care about floor right now. So I weaseled my way out of that one.
Yeah, you really did. I mean, Domínguez is a year younger, and the demonstrated offense ability, I think, is not entirely but largely offset by the defensive shortcomings.
That's true.
I think they're closer in real life value than we might think. And my lean would be it actually helps both players in a weird way because Domínguez would no longer have the same weight of the world from being the Martian and being the $5 million international free agent signing as a teenager. Like some of that maybe would go away. New people in his ear, that could help. Don't know if the Dylan Cruz situation gets easier with the Yankees, but he'd fit on the roster a little bit better. They
are looking for a future center fielder. So, and like right now people think maybe Spencer Jones, but he has his own contact issues and throwing Cruz in that mix might get them a center fielder. I can't imagine Taboni does it.
I don't think so. I don't think he would, but just getting spicy again because still got some peppers here on the desk. How about some pitching roster decisions that came down? Mick Abel makes the Twins rotation with Zebby Matthews going down to AAA.
Yeah, my last rankings, Mick Abel and Brandon Sproat had passed the other options in their rotations because it sounds like Brandon Sproat has made the Brewers. Gasser and Logan Henderson are going down. I do really like Gasser and Logan Henderson and Zebby Matthews. I still do like them, but I had put more innings into Mick Abel and Brandon Sproat, and their projections are pretty good. They have wide arsenals with good stuff. So, Abel and Sproat are in the big leagues now, and that's what really ends up mattering when you're doing rankings and when you're thinking about these sort of things. So I just wanted to also give you a sense of how good Mick Abel could be. His arsenal right now with stuff plus, location plus, and pitching plus are up on the screen. It's a very good four-seamer. The average four-seamer is around 96 stuff plus, so this is a very good four-seamer. He's locating really well. Locations have not always been a good thing for him, so for him to be locating well is good. The curve is a strength, the change, the sinker, the sweeper, everything looks good except for the slider, and that is a little annoying to me because a right-hander without a slider is an annoying thing to me. But he does have such a wide mix, and he's commanding it well, and he must have some feel for spin with that curve. So maybe he pushes the slider in certain directions and makes it better. Maybe it's just good enough the way it is. I would say that Mick Abel is one of the more exciting young pitchers in the game right now. With this wide of an arsenal, with this much stuff. So I think he's a pickup in any size league anywhere if he's available.
Looking at the main event I was in on Friday night with our buddy JH, I was looking. Brandon Sproat was a 24th round pick. It's a 15-team league, so that's still just outside the top 300 by a little bit. I could see an up arrow on Sproat as a result of that. Mick Abel was going similar. No, Mick Abel went a lot earlier. Mick Abel went in the 18th round. I mean, do you agree with the gap being that wide between those two guys right now, based on this stuff?
I'm not sure. But maybe it has something to do with the division Mick Abel's pitching in. There might be some softer landing for him. Is there something with prospect pedigree? Maybe. I think Mick Abel was at times the top prospect in the Phillies organization. In terms of arsenal, Brand Sproat has two really excellent breaking balls. That sweeper is really, really good. The curveball is good. And his four-seamer and sinker are about the same level of Mick Abel. But he's a little bit similar in that he's had some issues with command himself, Sproat. But right now, he's locating everything at an above-average rate in the spring. So, I think I'd like Abel a tiny bit better, but I don't think they should have that big of a gap.
I imagine, too, just the confirmation that Sproat is making the rotation. I think that's happened. Since that draft occurred, he'll jump up a couple of rounds. Big late movement for guys that are confirmed in that have stuff like that. Parker Messick in over Logan Allen. Logan Allen to AAA for
That's
the Guardians.
That's a big few for me, dude. I just been operating on the assumption that Messick would make this, and every once in a while somebody said, "Is he making it?" And I'm like, "Yeah, dude. Logan Allen has options. They'll see that eventually."
They know. Yeah. They know the situation there. Parker Messick is pretty interesting. I'm wondering if the whip actually comes down from where it was last year, 131. I think was the highest he had at any stop other than a brief outing at like high A in 2023. So it might be pretty good ratios. Not necessarily an elite K rate, but just seems like a guy that has a good plan up there.
There is a relationship between whip and K rate. I mean, just reducing the amount of potential balls in play by the strikeout, it's a definitional relationship, a K is not a hit.
Yeah, I think I like Messick. Like if you're saying who's more likely to make an impact in a 15 or a 12-team league all season, to me it's Sproat or Abel. Messick is one notch below that. Very rosterable, probably more of a streamer in shallow leagues and kind of like a 14 to 15 team league target.
Yeah, another way of saying it is I'd be more careful with Parker Messick's matchups.
Yeah, but a pitcher that we do like a bit as a nice guy that's made his way through that Cleveland system.
If you have a need for speed, I think there's two guys that are pretty interesting, Justin Crawford and Carson Benge. Carson Benge in New York with the Mets and Justin Crawford in Philadelphia. Philadelphia, that one got weird because Johan Rojas had caught a PED suspension. And once that happened, I was like, Justin Crawford's in because they need a center fielder other than Brandon Marsh, like they just didn't have that. So Crawford's glove gets him in. With Benge, I don't know that they needed his glove as much, but maybe as a backup in center as well. But maybe his glove did have something to do with it. Maybe they didn't love what they saw from Brett Beatty in the outfield. Because now there's a thought that maybe Beatty and Vientos are sharing DH. There's a little bit of a 3-player for 2 spots thing going on there, I think. Vientos didn't have a good spring, but his manager told him, you're on the roster. You're not trying to win a job. But Vientos is the righty. Brett Beatty is a lefty. Benge is a lefty. That's going to matter in the end. I would think that Benge and Beatty get most of the playing time, but, that's up for debate.
Looking at Benge's profile, he played college ball. Jackson Merrill didn't. I kind of see shades of the Jackson Merrill starter kit there, just in terms of the hitter. Controls the zone really well. Some power.
Really good bat
speed.
to ball.
Yeah. It really looks like a guy that could come up and hold his own. I don't know. I mean, the projections always sort of temper your expectation with players like this. I think the most optimistic line comes from Zips, 246, 326, 399, 13 homers, 11 steals, and that's in 116 games. It's a good player, but not a shallow league must-have sort of player if that's what he actually is in year one.
Yeah, but it is the type of thing that could pop pretty close to 2020, 2010, 2015, something like that. He's going to give you some steals, and it is the type of thing that I might even... I mean, I think it's a little bit of stretch in 10 teams because there's just so many good options on the wire. But if you just wanted to, test to see if the first week he plays every game, that would be really meaningful. Sometimes it's when you're playing fantasy or think about these things, like sometimes it's interesting to just have some sort of rubric where you can be like, if he does this, then I drop him or I keep him. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, at least with him, it's like if he plays for most of those games, then you can be more interested than you were a week ago.
I like the overall like balanced nature of his approach as a hitter. I just think that gives him a good chance of finding the floor quickly. Whereas with Crawford, I'm like, if he hits the ball on the ground too much, doesn't hit at all, then he goes down. Same thing could happen with Benge, but the production and the power, it just seems like it could be a really odd profile at first, even though Justin Crawford's been great in the minor leagues. Like
61% ground balls this spring for Justin Crawford, and he has years in the minors where he had, in 2023, he hit 70% of his balls on the ground. I've never seen that. Seen that.
It's unusual for sure. I know the stolen base potential is going to be the thing that pulls people in, and probably in most cases leads Crawford to go off the board before Benge. I wouldn't be surprised if Benge has a better rookie season of the two if you give them similar amounts of playing time. Robbie Snelling came up a little earlier in the conversation. I'm very high on him, even though he got optioned down. Just wanted to mention him again as someone that I think we'll see sooner rather than later in that Marlins rotation.
A real small one here, though. JJ Bleday got optioned. That's not the big news. The big news is, thank God for me, I have like 3 or 4 shares of this. Spencer Steer probably has mostly an everyday job in left field. I mean, those two guys were a little bit redundant to each other if Steer can play in the outfield.
Yeah, a little less crowded with that decision to send JJ Bleday down. So definitely good news for Eno and anybody else out there with a bunch of Spencer Steer on their rosters. We need to go. A reminder, you can join our Discord with the link in the show description. If you made it all the way to the end of this video on YouTube, be sure to hit the like button and stay tuned. We got episodes coming out all week. Looking forward to opening day. That's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you on Tuesday. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure to hit that subscribe or follow button so you never miss an episode. If you enjoyed it, drop us a like, leave a rating, or sound off in the comments. We'll see you next time.